Let me explain each letter first, and then we'll sing the song. Okay? So the tune is more or less to Itsy Bitsy Spider. So it's this incremental, step by step. And incorporated into each phrase is words which are what the letter actually means. So, for example, Aleph being a plan. It's also the first letter of the word Abba, which is the one who builds his house. It's also a purpose. And then Bet is a container. Gimel means to be sent, like an ambassador or a voyager. It also goes and comes back, so it's the retrieval concept. Dalet is a door. Hey is to like a window or to open or to reveal, so it means like, hey, look, it's pointing, it's declaring something. Vav can mean a hook or a nail or that which attaches. And so it can be like a bridge, right? It attaches this side to that side. But a man is one who is supposed to attach the concerns of earth with the concerns of the heavens. And so nowhere in the scriptures it says man is the Vav or man is number 6, but it talks about man being created on the 6th day and the number of man being 6, so it's kind of an inferred connection. The Zion itself is a weapon which cuts off. So the 7th day is the one of 7 cut off days. Believing that Yeshua, being the one man that was cut off for the sake of his people, the number 7, people say, well, the number 7 is the perfect number. Why is that? Well, if you study the letters and what they mean, there's these other inferences. So it says the cut off, perfect yet. He wasn't cut off for the sake of a crime that he committed. He was cut off, but yet still perfect. These are meanings that are embedded in the Zion. So the one of 7 is also, the word, if you look back on that chart that we have in the other room, you'll see that the concept of a tree full of its ripe fruit, like picture an orange tree or a lemon tree, or it's these glorious colors. That's a picture of 7-ness. And 8 means kind of new beginning. And 9 is a full basket. So between these 3, you go like, well, how does 7, 8, 9, or Zion, Chet, Tet being round like a full basket or round like a potter's wheel? You say, well, if you have a basket of collected fruit, and if the fruit being on its tree at number 7 at the Zion, you have to put the weapon to the tree, even if it's your hand to pick the fruit off the tree, and then you're bringing it, is like a new beginning, as it were. It's even shaped, the Arabic number 8 is shaped like the infinity symbol. So there's this concept of, well, there's 7 days of creation, and Het 8 is a new beginning. Is there 6,000 years given to man on the face of the earth, or is there 7? And is the realm of eternity the 8? There's these pictures, these themes that are embedded in the shapes of the letters and the numbers and the concepts. And so part of this class is not to give you a bunch of answers, but to bring up issues to contemplate and to ponder and consider, and to start looking and weaving what you know, what you see, what you find, looking at the dictionary and say, well, these words make me think of this and make me think of that, and you start processing everything together. It's all a big stirring. So hopefully this class is to stir things up. But when you sit there and think, well, if 7's a perfect number, but yet 8's a new beginning, isn't that better than 7? If 7's where you put a weapon to something, I mean, why is, and then yet the letter Kuf, which is way off in the distance, is like this, Zadi's a resurrection, and the Kuf is like this ascension or him coming. It's like, you can't just put one meaning to one letter and say, oh, that's what that is. So what I'm trying to show you in going through this list and in going through what we're talking about is that things are not static, they're moving, and that actually in every letter is every other letter. It's a bit of a concept which we'll hopefully we'll get to. But bear in mind that you can't just isolate every letter saying this is what that means, and now this one is what that means. And when you have this other concept, say, well, which of the two is it? You'll sometimes find this other concept in both the letters, in all the 22 letters. And so it may seem kind of confusing, but so part of this class is to get us to change our way of thinking. And so you have what's called the Greco-Roman mindset, or the American English mindset, or the Western versus Eastern, but here we have this Hebraic mindset. And so what's the Hebraic mindset? Well, fundamentally it's determined, I believe, by what these letters mean. And so as we go through this, the purpose of this song, the purpose of this is to give you pictures and a story of the progression of the letters. So if you can relate what the alphabet is, its actual sequence, to the stories, then all you have to say is a certain word like barbecue. Okay, where's the barbecue? Well, you have to come into the other guy's property, because the barbecue's not at your place, it's in the other guy's fence, right? So you come into the fence, into the het, into this other, and then the first thing you do is have this barbecue grate. Well, that's the picture of the Mishkan pattern, but we'll get to that later. But my point is to say you come into this other fence, and then that's where you have the barbecue grate. And if you can think of what the Kaf and the Lamed lines up with the altar of sacrifice, which is actually a barbecue grill, and it's inside the fence. If you see how the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is set up, then if you remember that, well, Het is the big fence, it literally means fence, and Tet is a circle, but it also is like being branded. So anything that you buy, that you bring into your fenced area, you write your name on it, you brand it, you claim it, you say, this is now mine, and who? My who? Well, the letter Yod is the hand of the maker, but it's also says, well, this is mine. The Yod at the end of the word means my. So you could say, whatever you bring into the fence, you claim it and say, this is mine. Who's my? Well, the guy that owns the fence. Okay. Well, then what do? Now you have then the barbecue grill. And so you could say, well, okay, that's Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed. And so what I'm saying is that if you can remember the pictures, you'll remember the alphabet. At least that's what it worked for me. I couldn't remember these letters. I didn't know how many, where they were, how to place them, and then all of a sudden when I saw the story, it's like, there it is. It's locked in. And now I can remember the Hebrew letters in sequence easier than I can still remember the English. Even now, it's like, JK, it's like, when you're looking through the phone book, and it's like, but with the Hebrew, it's like, boom, I got the pictures right there. So the point of this is to say, okay, Aleph through Zion means to be cut off. So I have the word Selah, which means stop and think about it. It's a suspension in the music. So in some of the Psalms, you'll see the word Selah. And then all of a sudden, you'll remember this thing where it says, well, when they were taken into captivity, into Babylon, they threw their harps up in the trees. There's a picture of suspension in music. The word Selah was a suspension in the music to stop and think about it. And the Babylonian captors would say, hey, you Jews, play some songs on your harps. And it's like, how can we sing when our city is in ruins and we've been devastated and we're taken into captivity? And it's like, they threw their harps up in the trees. That's a picture of Selah. Think about what just happened. Why were you taken into captivity? So the thing about all this is if you know what these letters mean, and then if you know what the letters that spell the words, and then you look at the stories that are in the scriptures, all of a sudden you can start putting all these things together. And hopefully in this classes, that's what we're going to do. So we're not just saying this is what the letters mean. You could look at the chart for that. You can look at Frank Seeken's book for that. There's a lot of resources which simply tell you what the letters mean. But this hopefully will, you might say, expand into these other areas. So at Zion, there's a break. So it says Selah. And then Het is a new beginning. So, well, what's inside the new beginning? Well, according to the pattern here, and I'm not sure you turned this on, Jamie. Anyway, the point is, inside the Het, Tet, Yod, if that's the fence, then you got the Kaf and Lamed, which is the barbecue grate, the Memnun, which is the laver of water, then you've got Samek, and Beyt. If you know the Mishkan, out in the courtyard, you got the fence and you got the barbecue grate and the laver. Well, that also lines up with the spring festivals. We're right up against Pesach. Some people started doing Pesach the other day. Other people are saying, well, it's a month from now, but nevertheless, Pesach is basically like the big white fence of Het, Tet, and Yod. We went into that on some other tapes. To go into that now would distract from what we're talking about, but just so you know, Kaf Lamed would line up with Chag HaMatzot, which is unleavened bread. Memnun with Shavuot, the 50 days of counting. That's the spring festivals. Then you have the fall festivals, 7th month, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. That would line up with Samek, and Beyt. They're inside the triangle. That's in the fall festival, in the set-apart place. Then the most set-apart, the Kadosh Kadashim, you've got Shemini Atzeret, the place of the Zadi, the Ark of the Covenant. And then outside the enclosure, you've got above the Ark of the Covenant, you have this pillar of fire, pillar of smoke. Now that's a transcending mechanism. The pillar of fire goes up into the sky and the smoke spread out. So there's this mushroom type of a picture where it rises up and spreads out. So, and it was above the camp of Israel that was in the Mishkan. So between Het and Kuf, literally between Het and Zadi, you've got the elements of the Mishkan. So if you're going through this song and you're regarding the elements of the Mishkan, Kuf means after this, which is also outside the envelope. And then you have...
Just push that. See? Okay, then you can show them to their...
Oh, I see. Okay. So you've got Kuf, which is like this mushroom-type shape, the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke. I have it drawn like a question mark, like this billowing smoke of a question mark, and the emphatic exclamation point. So there's the pillar of fire, the exclamation point, the billowing pillar of smoke, like a question mark. So the symbol of a question mark combined with an exclamation point is kind of like the Kuf, our letter Q. But that sets apart, it means after this or the back of the head. So Resh Shin Tav, the last three letters, it's kind of like in its own place. So in explaining the story here, you have Aleph through Zion as being one thing. You've got this Mishkan group between Het and Zadi as another. Then you have the Kuf, the transition, like Vav is a bridge, and it's a transition between the black and the white. So to go back on here, Het is for safekeeping. Het is the fence, but it's like this castle. It's the tower. It's that which it protects you. It's like Mount Zion. Sealed by Tet like a wedding ring, branded, claimed by Yod, his hand, the Creator's hand, who formed my hand. He formed my hand to hold on to his, but also to hold on to his, in the letter Kaf, is an open hand. Well, it lines up with the altar of sacrifice, which lines up with the Torah, just part of the other teaching. But the Torah, so you can hold your Kaf, your open hand sideways, and you have like lines. So a picture of a palm branch is like a Kaf picture. It's these lines. A spectrum of colors like a rainbow, lines like on music, of musical staff. This is a picture of Kafness, you might say. Moshe said to Yahweh, show me your kavod, your glory. And he says, no one can see my face and live, but I will put my kaf on you, my hand on you. I will cloak you with my kaf, pass by, then take it off, and you can see my backside. Well, if you know the letters, Kuf means the backside. After this, the back of the head, the heel, that which follows you when you go past. So he showed Moshe his Kuf view by putting his Kaf on him. Well, according to this pattern, the Kaf also means the Torah. And so you could say, if Yahweh covers you in his Torah, it enables you to see his Kuf view, which is the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, his, what some people call the glory cloud. And it's like, so there's these pictures embedded. Anyway, the word lameding. The word lamed is the name of the letter, but it also means to teach and learn. To lamed is to teach and learn. The letter has a hook, it curves around shape, and you could say to teach and learn is to repeat, to just keep going over it and over it and over it. So that's one of the things we're doing in this class is just kind of going over it and over it, and then you'll learn. That's how you learn, is to go over it and over it and repeat. So that's literally what the word means in Hebrew, is to repeat and to go over it and over it. Mem means from. It's a place with your birth. It also means the location that something happens, and it also means to be departed from or away from. So it means from, coming from. It also means from, away from. Nun is to restart a life, or to that which comes from Mem. So you can say, well, what comes from the promise? Mem is like a promise, something that's birthed, where you like the festival of Shavuot, you're counting 49. You're counting 7 sevens, and then it's the 50th day. That what comes out. So the Mem is like this period of pregnancy or incubation or gestation, and then Nun is the 50th day, which is Pentecost. In Greek, Pentecost means count 50. So Yahweh gave us his instructions, his kaf, for us to learn lamed, with the promise, mem, that something would happen depending on how we lameded his kaf, how we learned his instructions, and it's going to be either the blessing or the curse. So the nun is that which comes out as either the blessing or the curse based on how we regarded his instructions. So from noon, a blessed noon restart. So the purpose of the song here is to say there's many alternatives, but this song is to help us remember a certain track. And the reason I'm going over this kind of slowly is to say if you can lock in this story, you'll remember the alphabet. So then Samak, I, and Pei in the triangle, together one. Well, the word Shema, Shomer. Shema, like this, is a menorah. The Samak is in the position of the menorah, which is day 4, where he put the sun and the moon and the sky and the stars in their places. And the word Shema means hear, believe, and do. It's the word for hear, O Israel. But hear is not just, oh, yeah, I've heard the story. Hear means hear, believe, and do. Regard what he said. Shomer, well, that's like the position of the Samak, a good steward. The ayin in the position of weigh, balance. It's kind of like your ears, although the ayin is an eye, and it's like to give careful regard to. And the word shomer is watch, keep, and guard. The first commandment given to Adam in the garden was to shomer, to watch, keep, and guard. In Japanese, the word samurai, the king's guard, basically is the same exact word. It's the same root. So Shema, which is to be hear, believe, and do as a good steward, doing what he is told to do. Shomer, which is to say diligently observe, to guard and keep, like the eye, the watchful eye, and weigh and measure and scrutinize and make sure you got everything just right. And the ears, like the word for balance, and like the scales. Judgment Day, that's all in that position of the ayin. And then the Pei, well, that's in the position of the festival of Sukkot, which is a mouth, and it has to do with communication, and together one. Samak, and Pei, those three are in the place of the 7th month, those 3 festivals. The set-apart festival being Shemini Atzeret, which is the place of the Ark of the Covenant. But those 3 working together are the 3 things that were in the Kadosh place, right? The set-apart place. The menorah, the table showbread, and the altar of incense. So you have Shema, Shomer, together one. These are the 3 things that I believe those who have come into the kingdom of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh because of the permission they got from the Vav man slain, or the red heifer that was used to cleanse those in contact with death so they could enter the Mishkan. The blood of the Yeshua HaMashiach gave us permission to come back and enter in as one forgiven and cleansed from the reproach that we brought on ourselves for disregarding his ways. So we're allowed to come back in. That's Vav Zion, so we can come into the kingdom of who? The Yod, the Creator, which is blue, purple, red, white, the colors on the Mishkan door of the embroidery, which we talked about previously. That's like Pesach. It's like coming into the kingdom where Yahweh says, you are my people. My people Israel should keep this festival of the first month on the 14th day. Only Israel can keep Pesach. It's not for the general public if you read closely the instructions. Nobody who is not Israel, nobody who is uncircumcised should be a participant in Pesach, according to the original instructions. So to come in, you say, tet, claimed. You're in his basket, his Yod, the hand of the Creator. So you come in because of the man who was slain, or because of the ashes of the red heifer, which is the picture there. You come into the big white fence of the kingdom of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Migdal, the word tower, the chet, the fence, like the fence of the Mishkan. You come into the big white fence after being in the wilderness of darkness outside the big white fence. So here you have the distinction between the darkness and the light. So you come in, and the first thing you do, like the 14th day of the first month is Pesach. So we say, thank you because of the blood of the Lamb painted on the doorway. The death angel passed over, and we get to be, Yahweh said, I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. Who's the people? The people who, because of the Pesach event, were called Israel, and they escaped from Egypt. This is all playing into the bet. I'm going over this so that we'll understand the bet. Who's the bet? Those who want Yahweh to be their Elohim, and they his people. How do you be his people? You regard his matters. What are his matters? These are his matters. And at a fundamental level, they're represented, his matters are represented by the letters of the alphabet. So you come in, Pesach, and right inside the gate, it says in the book of Exodus, where it's describing the pattern of the Mishkan to be made, right inside was this altar of sacrifice. The 15th day is when they had the first day of unleavened bread. But the evening of the 14th is Pesach. So it's like right inside the gate. What do you do when you come into the kingdom? You learn the Torah. See, you don't have to learn the Torah to be outside the kingdom. So it doesn't matter if you know what day the Sabbath day is, if you know what the Ten Commandments are, if you know what it means to love him and what it really means to love your neighbor, because you're outside and you need to come in. And once you come in, the first thing you do is you learn the Torah. That's Kaf and Lamed. Here's the instructions, Kaf. Teach and learn, rehearse, go around them. That's Lamed. Lameding, so that, here's the promise, like the time of incubation and gestation. Mem, like a womb, it grows and develops. And then Nun, you get the blessing or the curse based on how you Lameded the Kaf. Pesach, Hag Matzot, Shavuot. Then in the fall festivals, now that those who have come in, been claimed by Yahweh to be his own, learned his instructions, and believed the promises. If you look in the book of Judges, he got mad at his people, not because they disobeyed. He says, you guys don't believe me. I told you I'd whoop your enemies for you. I told you I'd send in the hornet swarm and drive them. I told you I'd send them confusion and bewilderment. Why don't you believe me? He was really upset with Israel for not believing him when he said that he would bless them and curse their neighbors. And he says, if you guys go after the deities, the false gods, the idols of your neighbors, this is what's going to happen. Everything that I would have done to your neighbors is going to come on you. And all the blessings I would have given you is going to go to your neighbors. You don't want that to happen. And I can show you verses where all through the Old Testament, he says, and then they will know that I am Yahweh. And that it was not for nothing that I warned them about this. Constant warning. And so the point of this talk is to say, if we come back to do these things, we expect to get the blessing that has been held in abeyance for all these years. The purpose of this is so that we can get what our forefathers said, there's nothing there. They dropped it and they fell into the pit of sewage, which was the curse. Anyway, so Zadi stands alone. That's like Shemini Atzeret. It means righteousness. All Israel should be conformed to the image of the righteous one. The Mashiach after Kuf means the back of the head, the long reach like a monkey's arm. Our noble Resh. Resh is an exalted man. So our nobility will arise also after this. We see the Mashiach coming back. Sheen, our shining. It means shining, sheen, teeth. And it's also El Shaddai. It's the monogram of El Shaddai. People that have mezuzahs on their door have this letter Sheen, shaped like a W. Elyon, the Almighty. Then the letter Tav, the Aleph, Tabd, the plan accomplished. So here, if we would go ahead and sing it then. If you don't know it, we'll sing it twice, and then I'll just, sing it the first time. Aleph is the plan that Abba purposed in his heart. Bet is the container of all he would impart. Gimel is the sent one to retrieve us home again, to enter through the door. The Dalet, hey, look, he's the Vav, man. Cut off, perfect yet, the Zayand one of sevenness. Selah. Het is for our safekeeping, sealed by Tet, like a wedding ring. Yod his hand who formed my hand to hold on to his Kaf, which is Torah, Torah, Torah. Our regard reveals the heart. Lameding, so that from Mem a blessed Nun restart. Samech, Ayin, Pei, Shema, Shomer, together one. Zadi stands alone, though all isles shall become. After Kuf, our noble Resh, exalted in the sky, Sheen, our shining Elyon, Yahweh El Shaddai. The Aleph, Tavd, accomplished and completed as he said. The one word left untranslated, the one we all reject. Still the offer yet remains, Chaim et Olam. For the simple Brit of love and death is Aleph Bet, his song, Ha-Shir Shirim, which is the word Song of Songs. So the word Song of Solomon is that. Bet is a container, and the aleph is silent. So to put it into the aspect or the container of a song is a bet experience. That's part of why we're doing this. So part of this talk is not just to say this is what the stuff is, but to help you somehow get an experience of it. I'll try to explain what I did last week regarding the experience of the aleph, which some people might have gotten a little bit disturbed by. I'll try to address that right off the bat of the next thing. But I'm just trying to say that try to read into what the letters feel like. How many people know how to speak Hebrew that are in this room? Speak Hebrew. Anything in Hebrew. A few words. Devorah, Mark. Shalom, that's a good one. There's a few words. So the interesting thing about all this is that, you have to start like, any little kid learning English, mommy and daddy and dog and cat and see-spot run and that kind of a thing. So to pick a few favorite words and to learn how to say them is, we'll try to incorporate a few words here and there. And they're kind of, you might say, critical words or critical passages out of the Tanakh. Are we going? Are we on? Or yeah, we are? Oh, we are. Okay. So this has to do with the letter Bet this week. So you could say, okay, well, if you look on the chart in there, the letter Bet technically means house or body as a non-object word. As a non-object word, it can mean in. It also means with, among, through. So there's a number of different ideas. But part of this class is not just to read the chart, not just to tell you. There's a number of books out there at the bookstore and probably online where you can have people tell you what these letters are historically known to mean. And so some people have come up and said, where do you get all these meanings? A couple places. One is, there's the historical reference. Two, who was it? Mark, did you bring, or who was it that brought Frank Seekin's book? That was you? You want to hold it up that people might recognize it? It's called Hebrew Word Pictures. If anybody's not familiar with this book, it's a wonderful, great place to start. He shows you how the letter shapes have changed throughout the eras from about 2000 BC up until present, and shows you some Russian letters, some Arabic, Hebrew, Phoenician, Canaanite. That's a great place to start. But I'm not just trying to tell you what that book says. There's also some Jewish authors who have written books on the, you might say, the mystical or the hidden kind of esoteric meanings of the flame letters. And I'm not trying to copy any of those books either. Those are things you can go look, and Bollinger also wrote a great thing about the letters. But what I've found is that if you see these patterns that we're talking about in this Mishkan pattern, you'll see why those guys say what they say in all these other writings. But what I've found is that if I read those other writings, I can't necessarily find how they connect to the stuff I'm saying. So I personally think that this connection with the Mishkan pattern, with the days of creation, the festivals, is a critical thing. So last week, we talked about the Aleph. Now, the thing about the Aleph is that it's the silent letter. There's a certain movie that came out a few years ago called What the Bleep Do We Know? Anybody happen to see that? Okay, it's a pretty obscure. It was actually about quantum physics. So I'm going to draw something on the board here and show you something about what was in that movie and try to explain what happened last week as I was telling you what the Aleph meant. What I learned, we could keep this picture of the banyan tree up here because this is another image of the same type of a thing, which I'll explain in a moment. When I was in high school, we learned about atoms, right, in chemistry class. So there's a nucleus, and then they said, okay, there was an orbit, and in the orbit you'd have a couple electrons. And then there was another orbit, and you'd maybe have some more. That's the orbit that housed these other electrons. And then for bigger atoms, there was a place for these other electrons. And that's the way we learned it, and you had to take a test based on whether you understood that. And then they said, well, that's not really the way they work. And then they came out with the symbol for atomic energy, which was based like this, nuclear. And it's like, well, these orbits are not necessarily on this one plane, but they're kind of. And then they said, well, and this is what was in the movie, they said, that's not really an accurate rendering of how atoms with electrons work. You have a nucleus, yeah, but these electrons are in this swarm. And the interesting thing about the swarm of electrons, they don't stay in an orbit. As a matter of fact, any one electron, according to quantum theory, which is like microscopically small, is that if you were to take a really fast camera picture and snapshot, you won't find the electron where you expect it to be, here or here. They're actually all over the place at the same time. It's like, well, how can that be? It defies common logic. Well, that's the whole point of the quantum physics, is it defies logic. Any one electron, according to quantum physics, is maybe in 100 different places all at the same time. And it's like, that defies time and space. But that's what the physicists have found to be the case of the way atoms work. They're all over the place at the same time. They're not bounded by time and space. And so, but we are time and space creatures, so it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit. Here's a picture of a banyan tree. The interesting thing, they have these in Hawaii, and I guess this comes from India. The amazing thing about this tree is that here's where the root structure is, and if you see one of these in person, there's one in Honolulu, and it's just amazing. A piece of creation is just a really great root structure, and then it comes up to the branches. There's no trunk to speak of that you can see, but then the branches are connected to the roots. These are all interconnections. These are not other trees. These are the roots connected to the branches. It's like, how does that happen? You look close and you can't tell what's a branch and what's a root. It's like, where did one start and the other one end? It's like everything's all over the place. You look at this tree and it's like, what kind of a model is this? It's a pretty good model of the alphabet, actually. So here's the thing. We are used to this Greco-Roman, Western, English-American way of thinking where you start at the aleph and you run through to the top. That's this linear path. And that's kind of like the electrons staying in their orbits where they're supposed to be. But that's not the way it works. Everything's this big swarm all at the same time. Kind of like the roots connected to the branches. And if once you start off on, people have this little joke, oh, you go off on a rabbit trail, and it's like, yeah, when you're teaching Hebrew, they call them rabbi trails. Oh, he went off on a rabbi trail, It's just like this. If you start talking about a certain subject in the Torah based on a concept or based on a letter or based on a word, you start going on here and you've got all these other connections. And you say, I'm not going off subject. This is the way the subject works. It works like a wheel. So you say, okay, stick to the hub of the wheel. And you've got all these spokes going off, but yet the spokes are all connected by the round outer ring, but it doesn't even stay there because every time you start on this subject, you can go out here, you can run over there, and you come back here, and then you can go out there, and it's like, it's all this subject. So it sounds like, oh, it's scattered, but it's not scattered. It was trying to give you an experience intentionally of all the different connections. So part of the time in trying to talk, it's like, okay, to keep it as clear as possible, I'll try to stay on subject and stay on this straight path of connecting things together. And last week, I thought I will intentionally take these divergent paths to show you the way it all fits together. And apparently some people were rather disturbed and saying, gosh, this guy's all over the place, I can't follow it. And it's like, you try to follow this banyan tree. It can't happen. It'll amaze you. Why am I talking about the banyan tree? Aleph is the silent letter, but the plan, the strategy, the picture, the mind's eye of the omnipotent one, before anything that he made was made, the omnipotent one calculated all this and go, yeah, I know how I'll do it. So in the picture on the chart, there's this vortex, kind of a funnel. Out of all possible all possible considerations, he narrows it down to this here. And then that, on the chart, this arrow comes up and becomes the Bet, which is the form. Bet is the form of the ethereal, silent thought. So here you see the structure of this building. This is the Bet, and yet the architect, the author, the administrator of the concepts behind the functional use and the location of this building, you can't see him. You can see what he made, but you don't hear his voice. The voice is inferred by what's now of substance. So the Bet is the substance of the Aleph. And if you want to know what the Bet looks like, really, we think, oh, it should be this nice little box. It should be this container. Well, the interesting thing about the letter Bet in Hebrew is that the modern shape of the letter Hebrew Bet is this, and you could have a dagesh. It's kind of like, you could say dagesh. How do I remember that? It's like kind of like a dog in the doghouse type of a thing, you know. That sounds like a B. If you take that out, it sounds like a V. Same as Spanish. It would be a vet instead of a bet. But the point is, that's modern. You can see, well, it's kind of like a house. Here's a shelter. Here's a floor. You know, somebody could stand into the shelter. But in the Paleo is shaped like this. Well, you could say that's almost kind of like this, you know, kind of embryonic shape. That's a symbol that's drawn on the chart. It's kind of like this embryonic shape, which no matter what kind of animal, whether it's a tadpole or a human or a giraffe, pretty much the smallest little beginnings of the cells all look like that. But the other interesting thing about this is it's a floor plan of a house or a tent. So here you have, if a tent is shaped like this, it's like, well, I can't see a tent there. And you could say, well, let's give it some dimension. If we can build this up, and then put a roof covering over it, you could say, well, here's the doorway, here's the public side, right? And so I was talking to Mark there about the threshold concept. Well, that's a Dalit, but we'll get into that later. But a lot of things happen right here at the threshold. They painted the blood on the doorpost of the lintel, the sides of the door. So this is the public side. Abraham sat in the doorway and in the shade. But around the corner here is the private side. So here's this concept of a Bet. You've got the inner personal space of your own consciousness, and then you've got the expressive social outer side. Well, that's embedded in the shape of the letter Bet. This binary aspect, a duality. You've got the concept of inner out, of or not of, the personal zone, the public zone. So you could say, okay, what does that got to do with the Bet and the Aleph? The fact that it's so is of a particular design. The Almighty could have made it to be, well, you know, we think in Christological terms of a Trinity. Well, how does the Trinity work? You know, it's like it defies our consciousness because we're used to a duality. He established this notion of duality in the Bet. And you could say, well, what has that got to do with, well, as soon as you say, what has that got to do with, you're back into this model of this tree, the banyan tree thing, where, it's not working. Anyway, you're starting off on this one branch, and you go, well, yeah, but it's connected like this, and then you go back down to, and it's like, okay, which track do you want to go on? We could go on innumerable tracks, talking about the Aleph, a whole bunch more tracks talking about the Bet, and then talking about the interconnection between the Aleph and the Bet. That's a whole thing. So the picture of the way the Aleph has expressed itself is in creation. Everything that's created is a declaration of what the Almighty Creator had in mind. He didn't make this tree look like that for nothing. There's a reason why he made that tree look like that. And you could say, well, it was just one of many options. The scriptures tell us that the heavens declare the glory of the Creator of the heavens. And the more we get these telescopes, Hubble and what have you, and microscopes, so we could get, the micro, the macro, the more we see, the more we can see the message that's in Bet, which is the created universe, is simply the message of the Aleph. Bet is not different from Aleph. Bet is the form and the expression of the creator of the Bet. So the relationship between Aleph and Bet is they're the same. You can't say, well, what's the Aleph? I think I understand Bet, but that's different. It's like even Yeshua said, his disciples said, well, just show us the Father and it'll be sufficient for us. And he said, I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen him. I only say the things I hear him say, and I only do the things I see him doing. That's Aleph and Bet. You could think of Aleph, well, the word Ab is Father, but you could think of Aleph kind of like the Father and Bet like the Son. And Yeshua gave us the model right there of how Aleph relates to Bet. Well, let's see the Aleph. No, the Aleph is silent. The Aleph is expressing itself in the Bet. And you can say, okay, well, the song is a container. The song is a Bet of the whole Aleph Bet. But the Aleph Bet is the container of the Aleph. You want to see the Father? Learn the Aleph Bet. That's what he gave us. So the Aleph Bet actually is a container, a picture, a form of the Father. As a matter of fact, if you go back and you read what happened on Mount Sinai, what Yahweh said is, he says, you will note that I gave you no image. I think it was in Exodus, I'm not sure, I think it might be in Exodus 4. But the point is, he says, I gave you no form and no image. Of course, that would have been before the Mount Sinai, because that came later, so it's not Exodus 4, it's somewhere else. But what I'm saying is that he told us no image, no form. You heard a voice. We talked about this last week. A voice. And so even though Yeshua appeared as Ben Adam, the son of man, you could say, well, he's the son of man. Well, the son of God, or the son of... We have this concept of what the word son means. The word son in Hebrew is fundamentally bet nun. That's the word ben, B-N. If you add a bet vav nun or write bet nun hey bonah, it has to do with construction. It's where we get the word bone. It's the form, it's the structure, it's the timbers that make up a building. If you look at the ribs in these rafters up here, that's bet nun. So you could say, well, if Yeshua is the Son of Man, what does that mean? He came in the man. The image is the structural form. And you could say, well, but he was the son of Elohim. And what does that mean? We now have to change the way we think to understand what he was trying to tell us. Part of what I'm trying to do here is to not make you either comfortable or uncomfortable with your favorite doctrines. I'm trying to say there's a different way to approach all of the stuff we've ever heard. So here's the thing. We can say, well, this Hebrew stuff is kind of interesting, and it's kind of this Jewish stuff, and I know Christianity came out of Judaism, but we have a new covenant, we have a new relationship, we have new laws and instructions, and so I think I'm going to curiously look at this stuff and see how it fits into my Christian paradigm. And it's like, that's not what this is about. Nor is this saying, hey, boy, those, Brother Yehuda has kept the truth, because unfortunately, from my understanding of rabbinical Judaism, is they have determined by their rendering of the scriptures, they have determined that they were given the authority by Elohim to interpret, transpose, and then you might say, ordinate, you might say, what the word means. Now, the Vatican has done the same thing. From my understanding, I've heard them listen to Catholic radio sometimes, and they say, those crazy Protestants, they say sola scriptura, Latin means only Scripture. But, and I've heard the Catholics say this, I've seen it in the writings, they say, the Scriptures say very clearly that the Shabbat, the Sabbath day, is the seventh day of the week. We, the Catholics, by our decree, by the weight, by the power, by the reality of our words, we change the day from Saturday to Sunday. It's called Sunday because it's the venerable day of the sun. Constantine had a hand in that, but the works were not just him. The point is they say we changed it to prove that our word had more authority than the written word of Scripture. So every Protestant who says, sola scriptura, now you can worship any day you want, worship on Sunday, worship on Wednesday, it doesn't matter. But the day you regard as the sacred, set apart, Zion cut off day, the 1 and 7 decreed by the Almighty to be the set apart day to do no work, that's the issue. The day you don't labor. It's always been the issue. They then, in the 300s of AD, said, you shall labor on the seventh day, Saturday, the Shabbat, and you shall not labor on Sunday to reverence the sun god. And by the way, our voice has more authority than the written word. The Catholics still claim so today. And they say, stupid Protestant who regards Sunday instead of Saturday is bowing the knee to the Pope instead of bowing the knee to the sola scriptura that they think they're saying, but they don't know. Apparently, there's a verse in the Torah that says, Lo bashamayim hi. In Hebrew, it says, it's not in heaven. And from what I understand, and I don't mean to offend anybody, I'm just trying to give information, that the rabbinical way of looking at that is that when it says it is not in heaven, they say, the Almighty said, look it, the way to interpret these words is not up in heaven. I have given you in your mouth the right, the privilege, the obligation, the responsibility to say what these words mean. You could say, well, okay, that's a matter, that's what we're doing here. The words are in our mouth to hear them, to do them, to interpret them, to make sense of them. But furthermore, they take it a step further and say, if the rabbinical council comes up with a meaning or a decree, then even the Almighty himself would go, oh, there's nothing I can do. Oh, my sons have outdone me. And it's like, oh, it's a matter of authority. Who determines the authority of what those words mean? Is it the Vatican? Is it the rabbinical council? Or is it embedded in the meanings of the letters of the alphabet? This is why we're studying this. The authority, I believe, is embedded in these letters. And if you want to know the truth, it's not a matter of putting down anybody trying to do the right thing or thinking they have, the gift from their God to decree certain matters. It's like, I've said it before, I've heard others say it. Everyone is entitled to believe whatever they want. You don't have to believe this. You can believe your favorite doctrine. You can pick your favorite church council, your favorite rabbi, your favorite priest or bishop. Believe whatever you want. I'm trying to say, did the Almighty Creator of heaven and earth tell us what to believe? And if so, how do we know? And I happen to think He made it so simple that even if you're illiterate, you can't read Hebrew. Look at the shapes of the letters. In Paleo specifically, the shape of the letter Aleph, well, you can kind of see, well, here's the nose of the cow, here's his ears, here's his horns. Kind of looks like a goat there, but, there's the Aleph. The word Aleph means ox. It's an Aleph shape. If you're looking at geometry, okay, in geometry, if everything's in an open plane, you start with a point, and if you're going to designate a location, a set-apart space in geometry, you can send a line out to infinity, but that's just a line in the middle of nowhere. You can send another line out to infinity, but it's 3 lines determine a plane. As soon as you do another line across there, you've now demarcated this space as being distinct and set apart. 3 lines determine a plane for a flat field, but it also designates a space. It's a primary shape. Well, that's the shape of the letter Aleph. Out of all possible things, he drew a line here, drew a line here, drew a line there, and says, this space right in here, this is my word. Out of all possible considerations, I have determined that this stuff right here, bet will be a binary consideration, in or out. Fundamental choice, fundamental distinction, light or dark. You're with me or you're against me. Simple. Heaven or hell, your choice. So on day 5, you go back to the Mishkan pattern, it's the place of the table of showbread. Why should a table of showbread with 12 loaves have anything to do with Judgment Day? Well, there's a pile of 6 loaves here and a pile of 6 loaves here. Lines up with the iron. Has to do with scales and has to do with day 5 where the fish are in the sea and the birds are in the air. It's kind of like heaven and hell, filling 2 different domains. And the iron has to do with the scales of, it means understand, comprehend, weigh, measure. It's also the word for ears, which is balance. And you better regard Judgment Day. He's going to look at every little thing. It lines up with the day of Yom Kippur, which is the day of the covering. Kippur means covering for our atonement. Our sins washed away by the blood. Thank you, Yahweh. But if you understand these principles, you'll see you're either forgiven or you're not. At the end of this world, you're either going up or down, as it were, to use the picture, heaven or hell. You're either granted life or you're granted eternal death. That's the matter. It's the binary. It's the bet. So you picture the simple form of a bet is also, besides a tent, is an umbrella. If it's a sunny day or if it's raining, you're either under that umbrella and you're covered, or you're not. Very simple. Bet. Very simple. Embodiment of the picture. So bet is the container. Bet is also then the house of the Aleph. Who's the house of the Aleph? Those who are in with Aleph, not away from Aleph. So as a fundamental distinction, the Aleph, which is 1, made bet, which is 2, which is other. And once you have an other, there's the possible distancing of the other from the 1. And so there's this setup of the house of Israel being separated from Yahweh according to the terms of the covenant, in which case Yahweh has to bring the bet back, which is the Gimel. So Gimel is the sent one to retrieve us back again. So when you have Aleph being bet, you've got now the need for the Gimel. Because as soon as you set the astronaut off to do the spacewalk and you cut that cord and it's like, how do you go back and get him? How does he get the house of Israel to come back? He gave Israel the choice. He gave Adam a choice, and Adam said, I think I'll eat. How does he fix the situation? He has to send a repairer to fix the situation when Adam chose the option of separation. We were fundamentally given an option. We have to look at us, each one of us individual, and say, whether you know the gospel, whether you know the Christian, the Judeo, the Jewish, whether you know anything else, fundamental humanity is of the Creator or not of the Creator. And so when it goes down to say, yeah, but what about those pygmies in Africa that never heard the gospel? I believe that in their heart there's a fundamental choice of a connection of or not of. Who made this place? How did it get here? I don't know, but whoever made this place, I can either choose to find and seek and be part of, or choose to alienate myself, be my own Aleph, be my own authority, and say, I don't need that authority. I either have to regard myself as number 2, not number 1, or say, I'm going to be number 1, in which case, okay, you've made your decision. You're not of. The good news of the gospel is actually that we can come back home, but that's for the next section, because we're up against time to break.